Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today, I'll be continuing my series of rebuilding a few Tier 1 Valorant rosters. Today, we'll be rebuilding Leviatan, who had some pretty big issues with our team that we'll dive into here in a bit. But before we do that, I just want to do a few housekeeping things. I've mentioned this in every video, so if you have watched those, you can skip through this. I'll add a timestamp for it. This is what I would do, not what I predict these teams to do. So, if you don't think the team would sign a player that I pick up in this, I don't care. Um, and yeah, this is also going to be an entire series of teams. So if there's a player who you think should be in tier 1 that's not in this video, they might just be on another video in the future. Even though I'm not going to be doing a video on crew, um, I will be doing a whole Americas recap after this. That should be out tomorrow, unless I am really tired and don't feel like recording that. I might take a break between Americas and Pacific, like just maybe like a half week or something like that. But yeah, regardless, uh, ignoring my tangent, yeah, if you think there should be a player in this video and they're not, well, they might be on another team. I also didn't do a huge deep dive into LATAM because there's only 2 teams here, and also I had to get to every other region as well, so that's kind of just a difficult thing. But if you guys enjoy, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Also, leave a comment on what you thought of the roster. Um, at this point, I think I've kind of figured out how I like to do these videos, and I think this format works pretty well. Obviously, the graphics being a Google slide and some clips I found of the players isn't the best, but I also don't have a ton of time to do anything else right now, so kind of sucks. But yeah, other than that, yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time researching players for the series, so anything, whether it be like, subscribe, anything like that, really helps. And yeah, let's get right into the video. So we'll start with the season recap here, where in the offseason, they brought in Nazwar and Mizzino, who to me were 2 fairly confusing pickups because I just didn't know what the roles were going to be. They also cut their IGL, I think, from the year before. All very confusing moves that I did not understand, but kind of worked out in lock-in where they got 5th to 8th, going out against Navi after beating, I think it was Vitality, and then, or no, it was Zeta, then Vitality, 2 in a row. And they had a pretty good showing there. Then in VCT Americas, they started off really hot and then seemed to like run out of plays in their playbook and became really readable towards the end of the year and kind of fell off. And then in playoffs, same thing. They went out in 2, just kind of all rough. And then in LCQ, they came back kind of revitalized and got 2nd, going out in the finals against Crew, kind of choking a little bit, which has also been an issue for this team. All those kind of things, whether it be the playbook running out, whether it be the choking, I feel like have been very big issues for this team in the past. And we look to fix that with this roster. So yeah, as we said, the goal for this new roster isn't going to be anything big. I think this is the lowest expectations I've had. But just to kind of reset this team, kind of get them going along a new path with a new coaching change, probably that I'm not going to be diving into coaches in this series, as you've noticed if you've been watching the series since the beginning. I haven't really talked about that too much, if at all. So they did let go of owner, so I think a new coach is going to want to take over, maybe import somebody from NA. I would love if they did that. I don't know who it would be, but just kind of have something promising that you can maybe make 1 or 2 other changes to at the end of the year, and go into 2025 having expectations to maybe compete in Americas. So as for who's staying and who's leaving, we're going to be removing Taco and Mizzino, 2 players that I think would be pretty obvious changes. I'll get into a bit more why later. And then we'll be keeping Shy, Nazwar, and King, which I think we're all very good players for them. And again, I'll get into why in a little bit. So we'll start here with Mizzino, who, as I mentioned, was probably a bit more of the confusing of the 2 removals that I made. But to me, he was just so painfully inconsistent all year. He would have big games against generally the worst teams, and then just would completely shit the bed against the good teams. Now, to me, he was, as I said, a big reason why they won the games they won, but it was also a big reason why they lost the games that they lost. So with the final bullet here, you can see that I said he was a big reason why they lost, or that the LCQ lower final was even close. So, like, the first two maps that they lost against Cloud9, he did not play well in those two maps. He was horrible. And then you took like he just kept dying first and like just was not winning duels at all. And then he kind of had some poor decision making in the last three maps, but he just started hitting every shot and was going crazy. And was a big reason why they got back into that game. But to me, just having somebody this inconsistent is just a big issue to me. I don't know. I feel like Smokes is the best role to have a super inconsistent player on. Um, but he wasn't like super feast or famine or anything to me. But I don't know, he was just inconsistent. Like it wasn't the way he played. He was just either hitting every shot or not hitting any shots, in my opinion. And then as for Taco, he was the worst duelist in Americas, straight up. I think it was close between him and Tens. But to me, just down the stretch, he just could not do anything. Whether it was entering, I mean, he had some good moments on the op. He was just like a budget cryo to me. And outside of lock-in, he had the one good game all year, and I don't even remember which game this was that when I wrote that. I think it was the game against Sentinels and LCQ. And to me, just with how he played this year, it just looks like he's a chamber one trick. Like he had some good moments with the op on the defensive side, which kind of transfers over from chamber when you're playing Jet. But on the attack side, he just could never find any significant impact. And then we have why I'm going to be keeping each player, and we'll start with King, who was objectively their best player. Um, he was arguably a top five player in Americas as an individual. I think that might be a hot take, but I think if you take into account LCQ, you might be able to figure out an argument for that. I think he was definitely top 10. Um, but if somebody put him in the top five, I wouldn't really argue with it too much. I feel like a lot of his IGLing issues, which I think would be the main reason why you might let him go here. But I will be keeping King as the IGL. I don't think I mentioned that earlier. But I feel like a lot of those issues came from owner and the way he wanted to play the game. Like I remember, I think it was on Plat Chat, Sideshow mentioned it, where I don't remember if he was listening to the comms of it or if he was like taking it from some article or something. But like King called a timeout late in the game. I think it was in LCQ, might have been in playoffs. I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember when exactly this was, but I remember that this was like King had some idea to do something late in the game, after, like during a timeout, and then the whole team was like, "No, we wouldn't do that in scrims, including owner." And I just have a hard time feeling that he wouldn't, or a hard time thinking that he wouldn't be a good IGL, given like a good like coach IGL combo, and like one that lets him more freely call. Obviously, that would lead to him being a little bit worse as an individual, but I'm completely fine with that if he becomes one of the better callers. Also, I couldn't really find anybody that was too much better in LATAM out of all the teams that I watched. Also, that could have been not helped by the comps that some teams were running, which is a real issue with me watching LATAM. Like figuring out some teams' roles and that kind of stuff just was really annoying. Um, but overall, like I don't know, King is just an incredible player, and I will keep him IGLing here, and hopefully he could continue to improve at that. He also, like at the beginning of the year, dialed up a lot of the right stuff at the right times. When when they did have like a lot of creative set plays and stuff. So I do think that's definitely a plus. If you give him like a bigger depth of a playbook or something like that, I think he could do a lot more with that. And then onto Noswer, who to me wasn't a bad player at all for this team. I think he played well enough to stick around here and get another year. He was just a solid player all year. Never really had a super bad game. I think he had one game that I would consider bad, and I don't even remember which team it was against. He was I mean, again, just consistent all year, as I said, and he's pretty flexible. He can kind of play like every initiator agent can play like some of the Viper stuff. I could bet he could probably play some of this like Killjoy stuff at least. Um, and yeah, I think he's just a really, really solid player for this team and gives them a really good shot to like you could win Americas with this guy as your initiator player. Obviously, it's not the best player in the world to have, but I think he's like maybe a top half initiator player, depending on the changes that some North American teams make. Like if you bring in Crashies, Trent, EU, like I mean those are four guys. Maybe I'm forgetting somebody here, but like you got those, you got Cowanzine. So he's I think he's a top half initiator player in all of franchising, and I think you could definitely make international events with this guy, and maybe even fluke your way into an Americas win. But to like have a solid player like this to start a rebuild is definitely a very very good asset to have. And then onto our final player here, we have Shy, who consistently just improved all year. Um, to me, he and King were the two main bright spots of this team in the regular season. And then in LCQ, Shy just went absolutely crazy. Obviously, he was playing. I think he. I don't obviously, and then I just don't entirely know. I'm pretty sure he was playing the initiator last year and then swapped over to a more sentinel role this year. You can correct me on that if I'm wrong. Um, but I just think he was really, really good at both. Um, and he gives you some added flexibility if you need to maybe drop a Noswer if he's not performing next year, or I don't know, like he could play like a flex role if you need to move King around to a different role if he wants to IGL on like Sentinel, you can do that. Um, and yeah, just the more recently he has gone absolutely insane at LCQ. He was one of the big reasons they reached the finals, um, and he performed really well in that final. So I'm going to take the guy that's consistently improving over some of these other initiator or even sentinel players coming up from tier 2 in LATAM. All right, so our needs here, we need a duelist player and a smokes player. These are the least needs we've had for any team. This is actually the first team that I won't be replacing their IGL on. Um, I feel like I'm not one to blame the IGLing on a team, but I guess for NRG, I was forced to get rid of FNS in my head, and some other teams just, I mean, straight up didn't have good calling, and I think there were better options. But yeah, we need a duelist and a smokes player, as I just said. So for some free agent smokes players, you have David uh, Sabando, I think is how you pronounce that. I hope I'm saying that right. Correct me if I'm wrong. Meathead, all very good options there. I think David and Meathead both made Ascension, and then Sabando, I don't remember what team he was playing for. As for free agent duelist, you have Ganter, Rube Koida, and Tuli. Rube Koida and Tuli, I think we're both on 9Z, but both can play duelist at a fairly high level. And then Ganter was on some random team that wasn't doing very well, but I was very impressed when I watched him. So the first player that we'll be bringing in is David, who I watched him in Ascension, and I was very impressed despite playing in a super weird system, playing some absurd comps. Like they were playing like Viper Raise Chamber on Ascent, which is odd to me, but whatever. And to me, I think he's just a really good, like mechanically skilled player. That isn't the best with Smoke's utility quite yet, but I think getting better coaching and better pieces around him and like a better structure could lead to him possibly turning into like a really really great player here. Um, and yeah, I think that's a huge piece to have. A player with like a lot of upside, I think. And yeah, I don't have a ton to say because there's not a ton that he's proved yet, other than being on a really great team in LATAM. And I think he could be a good piece to eventually get this team rolling and back like at the top of Americas again. And then as for Ganter, another player, in my opinion, that has a lot of upside. and just like honestly does also just have a decent floor. Like whenever he was entering, I always thought he did his job very, very well. Um, whether it be just like going in first and being that piece that everybody either goes in to trade out or, I mean, yeah, just everybody traded him out very well. Um, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I don't think the trading itself was really good, but he put himself in a good position to be traded or get a kill most of the time on execs. He had some issues overheating, but that was generally like in post plants, and that can definitely be fixed with better coaching. Um, and honestly, he's just super mechanically gifted, and I think if he gets more support, better teammates, better coaching, all that kind of stuff, he can get a lot better really quickly. Um, I did compare him to I think it was Garnets from Talon, who started off the year really hot and kind of tapered off towards the end of the year, but I still think he was fairly good at the end of the year. And I don't know. I just think this guy is kind of getting overlooked. Like I haven't seen anybody talking about him. To be fair, I haven't seen anybody talking about tier two Latam Talon at all. Um, but I am really high up on Cancer. I think he could be a really good player for a franchise team or maybe a top challengers team. So yeah, here's our final roster here. We have Ganter playing the duelist, Opper, all that kind of stuff. King as our flex player in IGL, Noswar as our initiator, Shy as our sentinel, and David as our controller. So let me know what you guys think of this roster in the comments below. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one for my Americas recap. And then after that, we're on to Pacific. I'm not sure which team I'll do first for that, but I'll probably mention it in my Americas recap. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.